Hey guys, it's Gary. Where's the music? There we go. I'm back again. I'm going to try to make a couple videos. It's the new year. Happy New Year, everybody, by the way. Much better thanks to antibiotics. If you were following my saga of being extremely ill back a while. Turn down the volume. I hope you can hear this. I hope it's not too loud because there's really good music in the background. Recorders, lots of recorders. The theme of this video, I'll probably do another one this weekend because come Monday, when I start a couple weeks of pretty intense training, I don't know, it's training. Problem is it's about 2 hours from my house that I have to go to, I believe, for 2 weeks. So it's 2 hours driving, 8 hours there, 2 hours back. Traffic is going to be bad. Pretty long trip. It's going to make for some long days. So if you make videos and I normally watch them, I will watch them, but I might be later than usual. And as far as making them goes, I will try. But I don't know if I'm going to have anything to update you folks on. Today, VCLT from Andrew again. I was overwhelmed. I went to my front door, and there's this big LP-sized box, and I'm like, wow, who's sending me stuff again? You know, and I thought maybe it was from somebody that was new and hadn't sent me anything before, which is totally unnecessary, guys. I made some great friends here, and that's the important part to me. Don't feel anybody that you have to send me anything. And Andrew sent me this other huge package too, and you know, all the way from L.A. He sent me another batch of stuff, and because of the upcoming job situation, I've had to do a little bit more running around, do crap like buying clothes and things like that I don't really normally do. So I haven't been home quite as much lately in the last few days. So I wanted to do this video as a big thank you for one thing, and I didn't want to wait too long because come Monday I'll probably be unable to do it for a little bit. And this is the first time ever that I'll have to do a VCLT thank you, but I haven't listened to all the music. Andrew sent me a bunch of stuff. Oh, just a bunch of incredible stuff. I'm going to show... hold on. The thing is... Oh, man. this big note that he wrote. It came in an LP box, and I thought it was LPs, and I'm kind of happy that it's not in a way. But he sent all CDs to me, so thank you for that. Part of the problem is my computer is about 10 years old, and I think if you watch some of my videos when the sound and video slowed down and the video froze and all that stuff, that's because my computer's old, dying, and it's full to capacity. So now when I get CDs and things, and I listen to all my music out of my computer, because like I said, my computer has better speakers than my stereos do. I got a nice woofer bass speaker on my stereo attached to my computer, so it's actually much better than the bookshelf speakers I have hooked up to my receiver. So I always load my music into my computer and listen to it from there because the audio quality is better. Problem is I've run out of space, so normally I would just get a CD and automatically load it in. Nowadays it's like I gotta find things to delete out of my computer before I can put any new things in. So it's a much more laborious kind of thing to go through. I used to just automatically load everything in. So now it's, you know, one and one. I'll load a CD and I'll have to find something else to take out. So I'm going to show first the things that I haven't got the chance to listen to yet. The first is Wynton Marsalis, who I'm very familiar with. Trumper. I remember when he was, you know, a young guy coming along in the early 80s when he really hit the scene. You know, touted as kind of like, you know, like the next Miles Davis, or like Miles Davis was in the 50s kind of thing. This one looks interesting because there's only 5 tracks on here, all of them pretty long. 13-minute tracks, 2 12-minute tracks, and a 10-minute track. You know, an all-acoustic band, as you would expect, just from flipping through the booklet very quickly. And I think it was, let me see, this is from '91, this album. Marcus Roberts is on piano. Joe Henderson plays tenor sax on here. Bob Hurst bass. Jeff Watts drums. So I think, for the most part, not counting Joe Henderson so much, it was kind of like the regular Marsalis working band at the time, I think. Interestingly, Elton Jones plays drums on 2 tracks. That's kind of interesting. Sadly, I have not gotten to hear it yet. I certainly will. But it's, you know, one of those things, probably today or tomorrow, I have to, you know, find more stuff to delete out of my computer so I can dump it into my computer and listen to it. Looks like a really, really, really interesting album, though. And there's another one. This one, which is a total mystery to me. Usually those are the ones I go to first, but there was a lot of mysteries in here for me. Andrew Centazzo, original soundtrack from a movie I've never heard of, Living Pictures. So Andrea Centazzo, 1992 soundtrack to a movie I've never heard of. Looks like it's an Italian movie, though. This is probably the next one that I have to find space in my computer for and dump in because I don't know anything about it. A 1992 movie that I don't know if anybody has heard of, and it might be you know, a movie in Italian. Though all the music was composed by this Andrea Centazzo, the individual tracks have some individual musician credits. So there's like soprano saxophone solo on one of them, an electric guitar solo. So this looks really interesting. I think this is the next one I'm going to have to put in. There's even one or two vocal tunes on here. So I don't know if it's essentially like an orchestral thing. Now this Andrea Centazzo is a composer percussionist. So I don't know, you know, and there's a mention in the liner notes here that he's done some New Age music, which definitely piques my curiosity. This is the next one that I'm going to be loading in my computer. In a way, I hope I almost don't like it, but I have a feeling based on these things, seeing these individual tracks that flute solos and alto sax solos and guitar solos, I think I'm going to like it very much. And I'm afraid that I'm about to discover a new composer that I'm going to have to start buying albums by, which is why I say I kind of hope I don't like it, but it looks like it's going to be something I'm going to dig. I will report on the ones that I haven't gotten a chance to play yet. I will try to keep these off to the side so I remember to make mention of them in the future. Oops. I'm having a bit of a cave-in down here. Hold on. That's what I get for trying to prop things up on other things. The next disc I haven't played, but a couple of performers I'm very familiar with, Eric Tingstad and Nancy Rumbel. Now, when they came around in the, it had to be the early 80s, was it Narada label they recorded on? I have at least 2 albums that they did together, generally with a third musician. And I know that these two stayed together and continued to make recordings together through the years. And I only have those early, I believe it's one of the Narada labels that they were on. I still have those CDs actually. And I like them, really, really pretty stuff. Kind of like a pretty version of Oregon, kind of, in a way. The band Oregon. And, you know, but I didn't follow them so far, you know, past the 80s. Not that I didn't like them, it's just there's so many good musicians. This one's from '93. Yeah, actually, this one is on Narada as well. So I guess the earlier ones were. And this says, you know, Eric Tingstad naturally on guitar. He plays dulcimer here, plays some synthesizer. Nancy Rumbel does the oboe, English horn, which I love. She actually plays ocarinas on here as well, which I don't recall that she did in the earlier albums. There's a drummer on here as well, bass player, a pianist, 3 different percussionists, and a saxophone player. So a bit more backing musicians on here than I think their earlier stuff, which was pretty solidly done by like 3 people. So very much, this is another one I'm very much looking forward to. I imagine this is going to be very, very pretty stuff. So those are the ones I haven't heard yet. He also sent me one with a note on it saying, you may already have this one, and it's Klaus Schulze Doom, which I actually do, and it's the exact same edition, the same version I have too as well. This is the only one that I actually do have, so I will find someone who doesn't have this, and I will pass this on, Andrew. I have an interesting history with Dune because I at the time this came out, this is, you know, like maybe his 12th or 13th album, I had bought all of everything that Klaus Schulze had done as a solo artist up to this album, and including this album. The first time I played it, there's typically at the time Klaus was doing two very long, around 30-minute songs on each side of the album. And when I bought it, he had Arthur Brown singing on, and singing what sounds like incredibly out of key on one of the tracks on the album. It's really the first time he did that in his recording history, was have really a vocalist on one of his tracks from his early years. This is from the very early 80s. And this is like somewhere like his 11th or 12th album. And the vocals really didn't do it for me, and it was pretty much through one of these 30-minute tracks, or 27, somewhere between 27 and 30 minutes. And it didn't do it for me, and I kind of put the album up on a shelf for years, and it was really the only one of his first dozen or so albums that I didn't excessively listen to because of that one vocal track. Odd thing is years later, I heard the other side of the album, which I had played and completely blanked out on a radio broadcast of all places. And they were saying, this is Klaus Schulze, and I'm like, well, I have everything by Klaus Schulze, I don't recognize that. And it was a really great track. Then the guy eventually, the DJ eventually came on and announced that it was from Dune, and then I realized, this must be the other side, because I got so turned off to the vocal side of it that I kind of put it up on the shelf, and I didn't play the other side, which is brilliant. It's right up there with all his first dozen albums, which I absolutely think is his best stuff. And it was only after hearing on the radio broadcast that I actually went out then and bought the CD. I guess I have this on album somewhere, which is what I originally put up on the shelf. And I did. I got the album in a duo pack, in a 2-pack with this packaged with another album, which they were doing for a while. And that is the same version that's here. The second track, though, is really a great piece. It's definitely worth, and it's almost a half hour, so it's definitely worth picking up the album for. But the first vocal one doesn't really do it for me at all. Most of my people that watch my videos would have this, but I will find someone and VCLT this to someone. But thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. It's very professional going off camera like this. Okay, now to the stuff that I've listened to. Here's a real dark horse one. And even Andrew's note says, kind of a wild card here. But here's some beautiful songs by this I guess you consider her a folk singer? Rootsy folk singer, Gillian or Gillian Welsh. I think I've heard of her. I think I've read about her somewhere. And a real, rootsy, folky. Gee, that kind of makes it sound bad. But one of the, the new artists to come along. Not that she's excessively young or anything, but I think I've read record reviews of hers, and it's I don't really buy and listen to much vocal music. And oddly enough, I was because Andrew sent this to me, and he knows I don't listen to much vocal music, so there must be a reason. So actually, this is the first one I listened to, first one I put on my computer to listen to, because I'm like, if he's sending me this, there must be something in it. And it's Gillian Welsh or Gillian Welsh. And she does vocals. She writes the songs. She writes all the songs with her music partner. She plays guitar, banjo, harmonica. It says hands and feet, so kind of like a percussive thing. and her partner David Rawlings plays vocal, guitar, banjo, and harmonica. The thing I like about it, well, first of all, it's all acoustic, and it's just these two musicians. There's not, 5,000 backing musicians helping them out. So there's really no percussion on here. So it's a nice, clean, airy sound. Yes, they're vocal songs, but they're originals. There's one song on here that's an original, but the whole melody and the chord changes sound almost identical to You Are My Sunshine, My Only Sunshine. But it starts off with a song called Scarlet Town, which I liked right off the bat. It's got that, it's definitely folky, but it's not it's not really country-ish. I think a lot of people would think of, if you hear something that's all acoustic guitars and there's some banjos in there or something, they would think of country music. It's not really country-ish or bluegrass-ish, like bluegrass, because I'm not a fan of that stuff. But it is folky, it's rootsy, she's got a nice voice. When I was listening to the album, I even went on YouTube and Wikipedia and started reading up on her, because she's really kind of talented. All the songs are written by her and David Rawlings, her musical partner. And like I said, it's great. There's only two people on here. I definitely will be listening to this again. And Andrew's note said, go on YouTube and take a look at the video. It's a very, this isn't cardboard. It's a very thick, I don't know what this is made of. It's definitely a porous material. And it's a print, really. And it's three-dimensional. All this is raised on here. And Andrew mentioned to go onto YouTube, which I did, and look up the fact that Gillian herself, or Jillian, I don't know how to pronounce her name, did a video on how to put coffee on this, and it actually deepens the colors on this. So she got this little video of getting a little dish or something like that, pouring some coffee into it, thinning out the coffee with water, and then dipping both sides into it, and it kind of dyes the cover a nice kind of like an orangish, light brownish color, and it actually brings out all the detail of this a lot of detail, the stalks on here and everything, and it gives it a more three-dimensional look. And I'm generally hesitant to do that. I don't like messing up my cover art, but I gotta admit, I'm thinking of doing it because of what I saw in the video, how incredible it looks. The music's really good. I definitely will be listening to this more in the future. And it's not my kind of thing, but I was very impressed by her. I think she went to Berkeley. She went to some music college and everything. And it seems like she's got her own thing going on. I'm always afraid of like the bluegrass and country-ish thing creeping into music like this, because it's not my cup of tea. But wow, this is really good. This is really nice. And I just like the fact that the two musicians did everything themselves. And it's funny because I swore that I was hearing some mandolin on here, which is an instrument that I love. And looking at the instrument list, there's no mandolin here. So I want to think that maybe it's the way that they're playing the banjo. It's the only other thing that I could think of. So they're not playing the banjo in that really speedy, picking, country-ish way, which I only listened to this twice, but I don't recall hearing that on the album. That typical country banjo stuff. I think they're playing it more like you would play a mandolin, like sustained notes, picking fast. Very impressive. It sounds really pretty and really nice, and I love that mandolin sound, and I love that effect. So yeah, this was a wild card, all right, Andrew, but really, it was very interesting, and I like it too, especially the first track. The first track right off the bat, just really, it was really nice. Really did something to me. So she's been apparently doing this for a while. She's not a kid, but wow, I'm really impressed. Really impressed by that. Now let's see. Where do I? Okay, here's one that I've only got to listen to once, but I did get in my computer. Benny Wallace, a tenor saxophone player, something called The Art of the Saxophone. This is from 87, recorded in 87. I think, now Benny Wallace was born, I think, in 1946. I forgot, I looked him up when I was listening to his thing, and I don't have the tab open now. I thought Benny Wallace was actually an older guy than what he is. Now, I think he's about 67 now. But I thought he was from a much older generation. I think I must have been getting him confused with another saxophone player. So he's not really of the like maybe of the Sonny Rollins say generation, which is where I was thinking he was from. But he is a very mainstream, kind of like what I expected, very mainstream tenor saxophone player. Not an avant-garde jazz guy, not a fusion guy. And I recognized 3 out of the 9 songs on here as being jazz standards, so I pretty much expected an album with jazz standards. But the other 6 tracks in the album actually were all written by Benny Wallace, so it's kind of interesting. So as opposed to a lot of saxophone players from early generations where they didn't really write much, he apparently is, a writer as well, writing a lot of his own stuff. And Danny Richmond on drums, from Charles Mingus Band, Eddie Gomez on bass, and there's guests. He's got a bunch. I guess this was like a theme album for Benny Wallace, because he's got 4 guests and they're all saxophone players. So I guess he kind of saw this as like a saxophone duets kind of record. He's got Harold Ashby and Jerry Bergonzi, whose name I've seen and I've never tried to pronounce till now, Bergonzi, both on tenor sax, and Lou Tabakin on tenor sax. And Lou played around with everybody, and anybody, including the Carlo Blaze Band. And Oliver Lake on alto sax, which is interesting because Oliver Lake is more in the avant-garde area. And now the interesting thing with this is, like I said, Eddie Gomez on bass, Danny Richmond on drums. But the interesting addition here for somebody that's kind of rooted in the mainstream is he's got John Scofield on guitar here as part of the regular band. And if you know John Scofield, which most people probably do, he's got that tart, chalky, angular sound. So you don't go to John Scofield as a guitarist in a mainstream band to try to replicate, I don't know, like a Joe Pass sound or Kenny Burrell or somebody like that. Scofield's got his own kind of oddball, edgy sound, and it's a really interesting contrast to the more mainstream trappings of the music to have Scofield in there. And this is one that, I have to listen to more. I've only given it one complete listen through, because it's like you kind of think you know where it's going with Benny Wallace being, more rooted in the mainstream. But Scofield is bringing it other places, and then the guests like, Oliver Lake on alto sax, it's kind of hinging it in a different direction. So it's really interesting, but it's an album that you don't put on as background. You listen closely because there's that, I'd say, slight clash of two worlds. It's not clashing, but it's an unusual combination of elements from the more avant-garde or modern jazz thing, to the thing more rooted in mainstream. And no piano. So really interesting. And, Benny Wallace is somebody I have to read up a little bit more on. He's still, obviously he's still out there playing. And probably will be one of those guys that does so until the day he drops off. Really interesting. I have nothing by him as a leader. I think I even got him confused with somebody else, to be completely honest with you. So this is definitely going to get more spins. And very, very interesting concept for an album. And I have a couple more, a few more actually. Here is something that I knew nothing about. Classical music, which I know practically nothing about. Here's a band called the Tripla Concordia, and it's 4 musicians. Most of them are playing different types of record. Well, 2 of them play recorders, the wind flute instrument. One's a violoncello player. The other one plays harpsichord and organ. And what they are apparently is a 4-piece music ensemble that plays early music. Now, when you don't know much about classical music, there's divisions of it, just like there is a generation, say, of rock music or something. And Early music is something that I don't have very much of. And one of the giveaways of it is it seems like a lot of early music is very heavily oriented toward the recording, the flute wind instrument, which this music is. It's all I think it's every piece on here is based around recorder music. And I didn't know what to expect until I saw the lineup and I saw the recorder on there. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting. And it's funny because when I absolutely love the album. And his pieces, all by musicians I've never heard of, like from the 1600s. Are all of the composers from the 1600s? It looks like Henry Purcell, Matthew Locke, John Jenkins. It's works by those three gentlemen, and I have never heard of any of these guys. All from the 1600s. This is the album that's playing in the background to whatever extent you can hear it. And I love it right away. It's completely different from most of the classical music I have because I guess without even realizing it, I don't have anything that falls into this category of early music. Pretty stuff. It's not difficult at all. It's not avant-garde. It reminds me of back in the very early 80s. There's an NPR station still around here that comes out of New York City. That all after from midnight until about 6 a.m. every night, 7 nights a week, and it's a non-commercial station. They played classical music, so for like 6 hours a night they played classical music, and it was great because they would play things that were 20, 30, 40 minutes long because they weren't a commercial station. They didn't have to stop every 10 minutes to do ads or anything. And so they played a lot of music, including avant-garde stuff, like anything that fell under the classical banner. Because I was a night person, and I'd pretty much be up all night, at that time, it was during a period also when I was unemployed, but also during a period that I was working on nights, and on my days off, I would keep that schedule, so I would still be up at night and sleep during the day. Always listen to this overnight program. And really dug the program, and it introduced me to, and it was all classical music oriented. Sorry about that flashing from the TV is even getting annoying to me. This is the kind of thing that they would play, and putting on this disc took me right back to that. Here's the disc. There's extensive liner notes in multiple languages on here, and I haven't gone through the whole all of the liner notes. But this is a 4-piece ensemble. It's really good stuff. Really, not only pretty stuff, but to me, there's a slight difference in early music to classical music. Maybe it's simpler, less cluttered, but it's all this recorder-oriented stuff. And as soon as I played the disc, it really took me back to those days, back in the early '80s, when I would like pretty much every night I'd be listening to this classical show overnight. And it was great because, classical music, it might not be avant-garde or anything, but there's just something about listening to it in the dead still of night. Sometimes I would stare out my window and just listen to this music. And it was very surreal, a very surreal experience that I'll never forget. And some of my favorite music recalls those times. In some cases, I actually have actual albums of music that I heard played on this radio program. And it turned me on to a lot of different music. And there are times even now, all these years later, that I'll pick up a disc of something, in the classical music world that I'm not familiar with. And it'll hit home. And inevitably, if it's something I in a lot of cases, if it reminds me of those times of listening to that overnight program, I'll love the disc. And this does. This is really a really nice disc. It's one of the few early music things I have. This is from 2002, and it brings me back to listening to music at 3 a.m. in the morning and staring out a window at the street below, which was empty and quiet. Classical music and a lot of avant-garde music is very well suited to that late night vibe. It maybe doesn't go as well along with daytime listening, or like maybe not so much listening to music at the office, or if you're doing computer work or something like that in a lot of cases in the daytime. maybe it doesn't quite resonate the same way as when you listen to it at night. There's something that just soaks into the atmosphere of the evening when you listen to this stuff at night. It's a really good album. This is going to get a lot of spins. And I can't believe, just listening to it, it really dawned on me that I don't have very much, or just about any real early music stuff. And I love the sound of the recorder. Two more. That same station, that same NPR station I used to talk about, had and still has a program. It's an hour long called New Sounds. Now it comes out in New York. It's recorded in New York, but it's a program that's syndicated to all over, to any NPR station that wants to carry it. So it may play wherever you live if you live in the U.S. And this is one of the bands that I remember hearing on New Sounds. Inti Illimani. And I remember seeing their albums in the racks in the early 80s when the whole New Age thing started, even though they're not a New Age band. New Age and kind of world music record stores starting having not only New Age but also world music sections. And these guys would end up in one or the other, even though it's more world music. Essentially, is it Andean folk music? They're a folk music band, and you know, the funny thing is I hadn't thought of them for years. I used to see their albums in the racks when I used to go to physical record stores, but nowadays, unless you look up a band by name, you're probably not going to stumble across them. And I think I'm pretty sure I had heard their music, but not really knew what they sounded like. They're a folk music, not like American folk music, like ethnic South American kind of. Well, they do Andean folkloric melodies, songs of other composers, and themes by the group's music directors. How they explain it. They list the band members, but sadly they don't list what instruments they play. It's a band that consists generally of about half a dozen musicians, all playing acoustic instruments, things like panpipes. And it's funny because you hear the panpipes and you think that it's a sampled synthesizer, because for a time in the 80s, a lot of bands were using synthesized, sampled panpipe sounds, but these are the real panpipes that they're using here. Like nylon string guitar, hand percussion, pretty folky. This is music that you could play in mixed company and nobody would say, what the hell is that weird crap you got on? The funny thing with this is when I played it right away, it took me back to memories of a few things. I have an old movie, it's actually a horror movie that Boris Karloff made in the late 60s. And a movie that I happen to love. It's one of those movies that everyone hates. Every review I've ever read on it is horrible, and I love it. I love the movie. And it was a real mishmash. It was Mexican, Spanish, and American backing, and some of it was filmed in Mexico and Spain, and some of it in America in the late 60s. And so I don't actually know where there's and I think it was mainly a Spanish crew, but I'm not sure. But one of the things in the movie that I love about it so much, besides it's totally atmospheric, the movie's all about the atmosphere for me, is there's a couple scenes in the movie that there's some folk music playing, traditional instruments, nylon string guitars and pipes and flutes, and just like this kind of stuff. And I love that music so much. And I saw this movie way back in the early 70s, and I've seen it numerous times since and bought a DVD of it and everything. And I've always wanted to find an album that had music like that. Couldn't really find anything really about the soundtrack so much on there. There's not a whole lot of information available on the film. Maybe if it was an American movie, I would have been able to find more out about it. And I made a couple attempts to find and buy music that sounded like it was used in this horror movie, like some of the scenes. And it's not scary music at all, actually. It was music that was used during some normal daytime scenes. Nobody's getting murdered, nothing's going on. It was actually some kind of pretty up-tempo folky music. And I remember buying a cassette one time, and I don't know why I thought this would sound like it, of something called French folk music, even though the music wasn't French. I don't know why I expected this. I'll never forget this. Cassette at the time, this is the late 70s, I want to say early 80s. I don't know why I was thinking that, kind of expecting that cassette to sound like the music from this movie, and it didn't sound anything like it. But as soon as I put this on, I'm like, oh, that's it. That's the sound that I've been looking for. And I knew this band, and I knew of their existence, and I never picked up anything by them, and it kind of faded into memory. And, you know, if physical record stores were still around, and I saw these guys in the racks, I probably would have explored more, and probably picked something up before now. Now that I found them, they've got a million. I took a look already online on Amazon. See, they've got a million albums out. It's going to be hard to pick up what's next, but wow, this is really nice. This is really good. Really opened the door. This was that kind of music that I was looking for. That was in that movie soundtrack. You know, the stringed instruments they use, these native instruments, like I said, the flutes, the panpipes, the guitar, light percussion, pretty stuff. They've even got a couple DVDs out of concert performances that appear to be out of print now. The only slightly, and this is an album from '87, so it's got really good sound. The only slightly frustrating thing is they list the band members on here, but they don't list the specific instruments. And but I love the stringed instruments on here, especially. These guys are really good. I'm gonna end up. Andrew just swung a big door open to me, and I knew these guys, and I just, for some reason, just went back in my mind, and I never explored. I never explored them, which is kind of sad because you can find them obviously on. You can find individual tracks from tons of albums of theirs on YouTube, and. If my description of it sounds at all interesting, I highly recommend you go and do it. And these guys have been around since the late 60s, actually. Various members have come and gone. Wow, I was really floored by this. This is really beautiful. It's a fantastic album, a fantastic group. Thank you, Andrew. One that I will be listening to a lot. And the last one. Charles Ives. This was really interesting. Now Andrew says that I had done some Halloween videos where I talked about music that I listened to around the Halloween season, and then even another video, I think a separate one, of music that, even though it has nothing to do with Halloween, reminds me of Halloween because there's something in the music that reminds me of that time of year. As a result, I always pull it out and listen to it at Halloween. Well, one of the albums that I showed amongst my Halloween classical music CDs is there's a lot of classical music CDs that are packaged and marketed for Halloween and for the Halloween season, and what they consist of is music that was not really written with Halloween in mind, but various movies over the years, television, even radio plays, I think, over the years, have picked a lot of famous composers' works that had kind of an ominous sound to them, or an ominous movement in the larger piece that they used in these movies and plays and TV shows, whatever. And as a result, they got used a lot over the years. They got like Bach staccato, the organ thing that you hear Phantom of the Opera and everybody playing. So a lot of these tunes weren't written with Halloween in mind, but through their use over the years, now have a Halloween association. But they're traditional classical music pieces. One or two of the compilation classical music Halloween CDs that I have had this piece by Charles Ives called Halloween on it. And on that one, it's nothing but a 2-minute piece, but it's kind of avant-garde. I loved the piece right off the bat, but that was the only Charles Ives thing I had. It made me, though, read up on him and go discover him, because that little 2-minute piece, which was all I ever heard by him, was so interesting. And I read his whole history, his life, which was very interesting. He's kind of an avant-garde composer, and that's my thing, And so over the years, I've put numerous Charles Ives. I've wanted to get a CD of just his works because all I had was this little 2-minute piece. And I can't believe that until now I haven't yet. I've got them in my wish list. I've got a ton of Charles Ives CDs of just his pieces, not other people mixed in there. And as of yet, I hadn't picked anything up. And when I first saw this, now Andrew bought this because he saw the Halloween piece on here. I don't even think in my Halloween video that I don't think I specifically mentioned that there is a Charles Ives piece on here, on those compilations called Halloween. I'm not sure, maybe I did. But he had seen that video that I made, saw this, and saw that there's a little piece on here called Halloween, and said, I'll pick it up for Gary, which was very nice. And sure enough, that little, on this CD, this version, it's only 1 minute and 56 seconds. But the rest of this 67.5-minute CD are all other pieces of Charles Ives, died in 1954. I guess the big thing on here is Symphony No. 2, which is 42.5 minutes long. This is New York Philharmonic, conducted by Leonard Bernstein. And this was the second thing that I had to play after the Gillian Welch thing, because I was just so curious. And the interesting thing is when it first came, I loaded it on my computer. When it first came on, it wasn't avant-garde at all. It's actually a really nice, I guess it's that main thing. Symphony No. 2 is much more of a mainstream classical orchestral piece. Very nice, very nice. I love it. I was expecting, just from what I read, it to be a bit more avant-garde. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other pieces, including that Halloween piece, though. And the 6 other shorter pieces, when they come on, yeah, that's when some of the avant-garde stuff creeps in there, which I really, really love. So there's a lot of depth to him. He's just not just an avant-garde kind of composer. He kind of did these straight orchestral things, too. And obviously with that music, when you hear it for the first time or even second time, and you're not already familiar with it, it takes time to absorb and to get into. But it took me all these years, because I've had those classical compilations that had the Halloween piece on there since, God, like the late 80s. And I still hadn't, I had thousands of things on my wish list. And I just had all these Charles Ives things there and never picked anything up. And it's so great to have one, a nice 67-minute, little sampler of his music. Definitely going to be giving us a lot more spins, because like any serious, heavy classical music, you can't grasp it in a couple listens, and a couple playthroughs. And wow, this is a great one to have. This is one that I would have picked up for myself, because I definitely would have picked something up that had the Halloween, the little 2-minute piece on there, just so I had it on one of Charles Ives' own CDs, as opposed to just in a compilation CD. So I'm really looking forward to giving this many, many, many more plays. So that's it. Another huge a lot of stuff. When I opened up the package, as big as the package was, there was still more stuff in there than I expected. And I'm playing that early music CD in the background, early classical music, which I'm really, really digging too. Really, by the way, that's real good to read too. The Tripla Consortium, I forgot what their name is now. I found it because I've been reading a book to that, and I was also reading the book to Charles Ives. I find classical music good stuff to read books to, for whatever reason. Even though you really should actively be listening to it, I don't count that as a listen, as a critical listen. It may be background, but it definitely enhances reading. I found for some reason a lot of classical music enhances the whole reading process. So I just wanted to say thanks to Andrew. Totally unnecessary, any of you folks, to send me anything. I'm grateful though, and I've even got stuff here, from this batch that I haven't even gotten to yet. And I normally like to wait until I can talk about each album, but just right now I didn't want to wait too long. And if Monday came around and I hadn't done the thank you video yet, I might not get to it, for some time. So the ones I haven't heard yet, I probably will get to this weekend. I also maybe want to do another update video, maybe. But thank you, Andrew. It's very nice of you. and a lot of the music. Hopefully my reviews and talking about it give you enough information to decide if maybe you would be interested in it too, anybody else watching. Okay guys, this is an oddball time for me to be doing a video. It's Saturday morning at just before 8 a.m. Very unusual time for me to be here making a video. So got some things to do today, and I hope everybody's doing well out there. I hope your New Year's started off great, and I will be back soon. Take care.